All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Josh Fote, publisher, a personal fitness professional. In just a few minutes, our presenter today, Dolly Stokes, owner of Stokes Method and director of research and development for FitTour, will bring you today's webinar titled Active Aging, the Future of Fitness, Functional Training and Progressions. Dolly is a powerhouse of information and enthusiasm. She's a leader in the fitness education and has provided hundreds of educational opportunities for fitness pros since she presented her first FitTour workshop back in 2003. She is excited to bring you today's webinar. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a couple housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared with all of you once the replay link is available, and that will be by tomorrow morning. If everything goes correctly, we will even get it out yet this afternoon. We would also like to encourage any questions you might have about the presentation, and you don't have to wait until the end of the webinar. Simply ask your question in the chat, and we will either answer it right away or get to it during the Q&A at the end of the presentation with Dolly. Today's webinar was made possible by one of our longtime partners, FitTour. FitTour is a great resource to get the latest certifications and to stay on top of your CECs via their online courses. Okay, Dolly, it's all yours.
Okay. All right, Josh. Thank you so much. And thank you to PFMP for partnering with FitTour to allow me to bring you this webinar this afternoon. So we're going to talk about active aging, and I spent much of 2002 and most of this year writing and researching active aging to put FitTour's primary and advanced courses together. And I'm really excited that on the PFP affiliate page, you can get both courses for $39.99 each. So if that's something you're interested in, I would encourage you to look into that, because that's a great price on these courses. Also, these courses are both ACE, AFA, and NASM approved for CEUs. So if you're looking to get CEUs to renew your certification, you might consider going through these courses. You can add on the ACE, AFA, or NASM CEU for a just add-on fee to the certification course, or you can purchase the courses individually just as a CEU course if you didn't want to go through the certification. In addition, for those of you who are ACE certified, you know that ACE just came out with a new requirement that we have to go through a course that includes that covers equity, diversity, and inclusion. And the primary active aging course has been approved to meet that requirement by ACE. So Josh is going to do a poll that will just take a few seconds for you to answer this poll. And I would appreciate you just answering it if you would. So then that kind of gives me an idea of the age of your clients, and that'll help drive the webinar when I can see how old your clients are and who the majority of us work with. So thanks for doing that.
Okay, Dolly, we'll give it a couple more seconds here. People are still answering.
Okay, great.
Okay. Blend that now, and then I'll share those results with you. Can you see those results?
Okay, great. So we have some people that are working with younger people, 20 to 39, 4%, and then 27% at 40 to 59 years of age, and then 68% work with people 60 and over. So thank y'all so much for answering that poll for us. So we're just going to go ahead and get started. If I can get my clicker to work. There we go. So, you know, when we talk about active aging, a lot of times we have an image in our mind that we're talking about people that are age 50 and over. But I would like just to propose to you the idea that we are all aging, that all of us, our clients, whether they're 20 years old, 30 years old, 40 years old, 50 years old, are all actively aging. So if you look at the photographs on your screen, you'll see a lot of women from different age groups, and all of them are all being active, and they are all aging. So we have we go all the way from young girls that play in sports in high school, all the way up to some ladies walking together with their trekking poles who look like they could be in their 70s or perhaps early 80s. So as we go through this presentation, I would just like to invite you to think about the functional training components that we're going to talk about today, and think about ways that you can include those, not just with your older adults, but also with your younger adults, to help slow down the functional decline that just comes with the natural aging process. Okay. So senescence. Now, senescence is just biological aging. And what that is just the gradual deterioration of functional characteristics in living organisms. So we are all experiencing senescence as each day goes on and goes by. So I put up a picture of an apple that has been cut in half, and you can see that the apple has aged. So that's an example of senescence. As you know, when you first cut the apple, it's fresh on the inside, and then as the day goes on, the apple ages. Well, when I eat an apple, I generally only eat half an apple, and then I save the other half for later. So what I do is, like, you could say, well, you could just put it in the refrigerator and it would be fine. But I found that if I put it in the refrigerator and without taking any other steps to slow down the aging process, it still does get brown in the refrigerator. But I found that if I just wrap a paper towel around the apple before I put it in the refrigerator, that slows down the aging process, and that meat, the inside of the apple, will stay nice and crisp for a day or two with it in the refrigerator, even though it's already been cut. So that's a real simple illustration of how to slow down the aging process. But when we take healthy lifestyle, we adopt healthy lifestyle changes, and we do some things with our training, such as functional training, and we really focus on functional training, that can slow down that decline that just comes naturally with our function as we age. So that's just a good example of maybe slowing down the aging process, just using that apple example. Now, all of these people in the photographs that you see, they're all actively aging. And I selected photographs that have couples doing similar exercises, but you can look at the couples and see the couples that are doing the push-ups, they are doing basically the same exercise. And then the couples that are doing using dumbbells, they're doing basically the same exercise, as well as the two couples that are outside enjoying the natural beauty of the world and taking a hike or a walk. But you can look at these couples and you can see that there are differences. So what are the differences that you see? You can see the physical differences that occur with aging, and it's just natural. In our society, a lot of times we look upon aging as a bad thing. You know, we're like, oh no, my skin's getting all wrinkled and I'm getting older and I'm kind of getting a little thicker through the waistline, and I don't have the same muscle tone I had when I was younger, those kind of things. However, you know, that's just all the natural process of aging. It's not good or bad. It's just part of life. So as we get older, we lose muscle mass. We lose muscular strength. We actually even our fast twitch muscle fibers diminish. So we lose power and the ability to move quickly. And then also we begin to because of the loss of muscle tissue, we begin to accumulate subcutaneous fat, and we also begin to accumulate visceral fat. So the active aging course goes really deep in detail about these different physiological changes that can be expected. Those are just some of the changes that happen with our skin and our fat and our muscles, but we will also have changes in our neurological and our central nervous system, but we don't really have enough time to go into all of that today. So I just wanted to briefly talk about that, but those are some things that you need to take into consideration when you're training your clients, is those changes in muscle mass, and also the changes in strength, and the fact that your clients, as they get older, will lose some fast twitch muscle fibers, okay, will begin to diminish. Now, you know that saying, you can't judge a book by its cover. So fitness does not equal function. Okay. So just because someone has a really high level of fitness, it does not necessarily mean that they have a high level of function, because I don't know if you know it or not, but our physical function and also our neurological function begins to diminish as early as the age of 30. So you could have a client who is a long distance cyclist, who has a high level of cardiovascular fitness, who has a high level of muscular strength, and then who is able to do an exercise such as the suspension lunge that you see here in the photograph, and he's able to do that with a lot of ease. So he has a good sense of balance. Well, he has a good sense of balance with his vision, and perhaps with his with his head straight forward. But in your function, in the active aging courses, we actually go in depth about somatosensory balance, which is very important for us to train for somatosensory balance and to keep our somatosensory balance up and honed. And so you might say, well, what is somatosensory balance? Well, somatosensory balance is where we use our eyes or our vestibular balance to help us keep balance. So for instance, we could take out our sight, and our balance might not be as good when our vision is taken away. So for instance, when you have a client perform this lunge that we see here with the suspension equipment, if you have that client dim his eyes, he might find that his balance is actually not as good as he thought it was. And so you might want to start training him to do balance activities with his vision blocked a little bit, because as we get older, that's one of the natural effects of aging, is that our eyesight diminishes. And then another way that you could challenge your client's balance and check their balance is have him do the lunge and turn his head like side to side and see how well he's able to balance when he turns his head side to side, and his vestibular balance might not be as good also. So those are some things that you could think about. And of course, again, like I said, our active aging course goes way into detail with that, but those are just some ways that you can help to improve your client's balance by just adding somatosensory balance drills. So now let's talk about program components that you would want to include in your functional training programming. So of course, you would want to include the components of fitness and also fitness performance. And for essence of time, I'm not going to really go into those. Those are topics that you learned in your personal trainer or group exercise certification, so you're real familiar with those. But then we are going to talk about these other components: goal-specific training, corrective exercise, integrated functional training, progressive resistance training, functional balance training, and functional flexibility and mobility training. So if you have a pen and paper, or if you have a tablet you can take notes on, you might want to take notes on these. So goal-specific training. So with your older adults, their goals are going to be different. Older adults population is very diverse. And so their goals are going to be different. You're going to have some older adults that are going to want to participate in a sporting event, and then you're going to have other older adults that simply want to be able to perform their activities of daily living and with ease and safely. And also, as we get older and older, then the focus of our goals becomes more living independently. So towards as we get up into our 70s, 80s, and older, that might be something that would be our goal, is just to be able to live independently and perform our activities of daily living without any help. So when you're setting goals for your older clients, the SMART method of goal setting might not be the best way to set goals for them, because their goals are going to they're not going to be centered around their physical appearance. It's going to be more about being healthy and also being able to perform with good function. So in the active aging courses, you do learn how to perform postural assessments, functional assessments, fitness assessments, and also wellness, because we want to look at wellness with our older adults, because that is going to be a big part of putting their goals together and helping them set their own personal goals. And then you, as their trainer, is going to set goals you're going to set your own goals for them also, to improve any deficits that you find when you perform the postural assessment and also the functional assessment, as well as fitness assessment. So now the next component is corrective exercise. So when you do your postural assessment, that's going to give you a lot of insight into disruptions through the kinetic chain that have led to dysfunctional movement. So you're going to address corrective exercise, and you're going to use it to strengthen muscles that are overstretched and weak, and to lengthen muscles that are overly tight. And then you're also going to use corrective exercise to improve the posture as well. Now, another thing that you can do with corrective exercise is myofascial release. And you can do that. Research shows that myofascial release at the beginning of the workout can help with performance. So that's something that you might want to think about as well. You can use PNF stretching and also the spiral diagonal movement patterns. So the myofascial release, PNF stretching, and spiral diagonal movement patterns, you can get really detailed information on those topics with the FitTOR myofascial release course that came out a few years ago. We have a primary course and also an advanced. The primary course covers myofascial release with foam rollers, and then the advanced course covers myofascial release with PNF stretching and also with small balls. And it also, the advanced course also has a section specifically geared toward older adults. So another thing that you can do, another mode of exercise that is really good for corrective exercise is Pilates Reformer. I have found that to be a very effective way to work on also fitness, not just corrective exercise, but fitness, where we're working on muscular endurance and flexibility. But the Pilates Reformer is also a great way to get in some PNF stretching and working in the spiral diagonal line. So and FitTOR also has a Pilates Reformer certification as well. So those are some things you might want to think about. And the active aging course goes into corrective exercise and gives you ideas and techniques to use with your clients with corrective exercise. So now the third component is integrated functional training. So you want to choose activities that are going to mimic activities of daily living. So those are going to be, you're going to think about the activities that your clients participate in, and you're going to think about exercises that would correspond with those activities. And you want your activities to be multimodal. Now, what does that mean, multimodal? Well, that means you're going to use the functional movement patterns. So there are 6 functional movement patterns. There is pushing, pulling, lowering, like going down to the floor, rising, coming up from the floor, and walking, and also rotation. So when we say walking, locomotion, okay? So when you are working with your clients, you want to include all of the functional movement patterns. So for instance, when you're working out with weights, you want to include functional movement patterns. So a lowering exercise, an exercise that you could do that would incorporate that lowering, would be to have your client kneel in a staggered kneel and perform some weight work, such as a lat pull down. So weight machines are not the best a piece of equipment to use for functional training. However, I have found that doing, say, lat pull downs instead of seated on a seat, doing them in a kneeling position, whether it's both knees kneeling or in a staggered kneel where one knee's down and then the other foot is on the floor, are a really good way to work on that pattern where we're lowered down to the ground. And then also that helps with balance too. That's another way to incorporate balance. And we're going to talk about balance in just a moment, but kneeling activities are a really good way to incorporate balance. So that's one of the functional movement patterns of lowering, and then having your client stand from that kneel is a rising movement pattern. So that is just, those are just some ways that you can include integrated functional training into your programming. Now, a lot of times we think that we are doing functional training when we're standing on a BOSU, and our the picture on your slide does show clients standing on a BOSU, and I love BOSUs. I think they're great, but they're not really functional. I don't know about you, but during the day and when I'm moving through my activities of daily living, I don't ever really step on anything that's like a BOSU. I step up and down steps. I go up steps, I go down steps, I might step off of my deck outside, that sort of thing, but I don't really step on something that is unstable like a BOSU. So BOSUs are great to use for balance training, but they might not be the most functional piece of equipment to use, okay? And then the next component is progressive resistance training. And with your older clients, you're going to want to use the same principles that you do with all of your resistance training, but just know that you're going to really focus with your older clients on endurance, power, speed, deceleration, and specificity. So with your older clients, you don't really have to address strength when you're looking at how many sets and reps for them to perform. However, do know that by incorporating power, that don't think that I'm not saying not to work on strength. If you have clients that have strength deficits, then you do want to work on strength, because you cannot incorporate power if you don't have strength. So your clients are not going to be able to move powerfully or push any weight powerfully if they don't have the strength to do it. And just remember the rule that you learned about power and speed in your personal trainer certification or your Group X certification. You would never want to add power and speed to an exercise if your client did not have the skill, they had not perfected the skill to perform the exercise efficiently, okay? And then deceleration is super important for your clients. So an example of doing a deceleration would be perhaps doing a squat super slow on the lowering phase, and then you could put power in by adding power on the up phase. And then you may, with some of your older clients, plyometrics may be appropriate for some of your older clients, Some of your other clients it may never be appropriate for some of your older clients to do plyometrics, but you could add an element of power using, for instance, in a squat. A good example of that would be to not have them jump like you would with plyometrics, but when they come up out of that lowered phase of the squat, you could have them come up and at the top of the squat, roll up into their toes, do a calf raise to just mimic maybe jumping without both feet coming off the ground. So that would help to give power there. And then when it comes to specificity, we don't have enough time to go into sarcopenia or dynapenia, but that's the loss of muscle or the loss of strength. And so if you were training client who did have sarcopenia or dynapenia, then of course you would want to include a strength element for those clients. So that would be an example of specifically working with that client and what they needed to achieve. So when you talk about specificity with your other clients, it might be that they have their muscular endurance is not really good, so you're going to focus on their muscular endurance, or they might need to improve their strength so that they can move with power. So those are some things to look at with your older clients. And again, like I said, weight machines are not the best mode of exercise for your older clients because it's not really functional movement. Dumbbells, kettlebells, medicine balls, and rubberized tubing or rubberized resistance is going to be really good. And again, I'll push the Pilates reformer too, because that's a really good way to get some muscular endurance in without using machines. So then with your resistance program, you should always include core, balance, and activities that mimic activities of daily living. So you always want to make sure that you focus on core and you also focus on balance when you're doing your strength training. So like I said before, doing the lat pull down in a kneeling position is a really good way to work on balance, and that's more functional than perhaps having a client stand or stand on a BOSU doing bicep curls. Just think about ways that are functional and they're going to help your clients be able to navigate their activities of daily living safely and effectively. So now let's talk about functional balance training. So, I already mentioned that you're going to include balance training in with your resistance training, and then you're also going to include resistance training in with your balance training. So it's all going to integrate all together. You're going to, mesh everything together. And I did neglect to say when we first started talking about the components that, don't feel like you have to address all of these components in every single workout. You can address some of the components in one workout and some of the components in another workout. For instance, most of my clients work out with me twice a week. So I will incorporate some of the components in their first day that they work out with me in the week. And then the next day, I will incorporate the other components. And then if we're working on something specific, then I might incorporate that component in both days. Okay, so let's get back to the functional balance training. Functional balance has 4 subsets. Okay, and you're going to want to always include all 4 subsets in your training. You're not going to want to include just one subset and just leave the other ones alone. So that's stabilization balance, dynamic balance, strength balance, and power balance. So dynamic balance, that's the ability to maintain balance while we're moving. So that would be walking is the ultimate dynamic balance activity. And then, in the active aging course, it gives you safe progressions. Having a client step up onto the BOSU and off the BOSU, that actually is not a beginner exercise. That is a progression up from beginner. You would never put a beginner on unstable or elevated equipment until they were able to balance on the floor alone without holding onto a bar. Now, I will say I shouldn't say never would you do that, because some of your clients, because of deficits that they have due to whether it's a medical condition or other condition, they may never be able to balance on the floor without holding onto the bar. But if you had someone like that, you would always make sure that they had a bar or a chair close to them if you were going to put them on a BOSU or an elevated piece of equipment such as a step to balance on. And then having a weighted balance where this client is doing a walking lunge with the barbell on his shoulders, that would be a very advanced progression of balance. If you did have a beginner doing weighted balance, you would want to make sure that they had the stability to do a walking lunge and they were able to perform a walking lunge efficiently before you added weights. And you would add just dumbbells, not a weight on their back. You would want them to be able to do a squat with the weight on their shoulders before they tried to do a walking lunge with a weight on their shoulders. And then stabilization balance, that is the ability to maintain neutral, stable and static joint position. So of course, the people in the photograph that you see on your slide, they are pretty advanced to be able to stand and balance like that with their arms lifted. So your progression would be to start one-legged balance, holding onto a bar or a chair back, and then move to having not holding on. And then another progression would be to add some proprioception, some spatial awareness, where maybe they have their arms up and they're moving their arms in space. And then you could also, the leg that is free, you could have them move that leg while they're balancing on one leg. So that would work on stabilization balance. And again, in this webinar, we just don't have enough time to go into all the different types of stabilization balance that you could do and all the different types of balance that you could do with your clients, but just like briefly touch on each one. So if this is something you're interested in, again, I encourage you to consider the active aging courses. And then let's talk about strength balance. So strength balance is where we add dynamic, eccentric, and concentric movement. And so this lunge with the suspension would be a strength balance activity where you're standing up and then lowering down using eccentric and concentric contractions to move. And so that is a good example of strength balance. And then the last subset is power balance, and that is the ability to control deceleration. Okay, and then the ability to accelerate and maintain balance at the same time. So we all have that family member or friend that comes to our home, and when they go to sit on the sofa, they bend their knees and go to sit, and then they just fall into the sofa, right? So the reason they do that is because they don't have the ability to control their deceleration as they're lowering down. And it could be either a strength issue or it could be a balance issue. And then they have to rock to get up off the sofa. And sometimes you might even have to give them a helping hand to get up. So they need to work on the ability to accelerate also from a seated position. So again, we don't have enough time to go really in depth in this, but this is just giving you some food for thought of things that you can work on. So a good way to work on power balance, the photograph that you see is just having a client squat down as low as they can and just hold it for a specific amount of time, and then have them come up with power, accelerate real quickly, and just help them to be able to balance. And then there's progressions you could go through to create a little bit more difficulty where they're squatting down with one leg lifted and standing up, and then putting the free leg down and then switching legs. So those are just some examples of power balance that you could do. So those are the 4 subsets of balance that you would want to include in your programming. And now we're going to talk about functional flexibility and mobility training. So functional movement, and that's movement that is smooth and fluid and is done efficiently. It is the sum of joint flexibility and joint mobility. So it's the ability to move smoothly and fluidly through the world. So a lot of times, we see older clients and older adults as they're moving through the world, they kind of walk like a robot almost, because they just don't have much mobility and they don't have much flexibility. So, those are things that you can work on with yoga, with Pilates, with myofascial release, I do a lot of reformer training with my clients, and so I feel like the reformer really helps to create smooth and fluid movement. And those of you who are Pilates certified, you know that fluidity is one of the principles of Pilates. So that is a really good way to improve mobility and joint movement. Flexibility is the ability of the joint or joints to move with unrestricted and pain-free motion. And then mobility is the ability of a joint to move fluidly and painlessly through a normal range of motion. So sometimes your clients may not be able to, say, circumduct their arm, a full circumduction, just because of arthritis and other factors that they have going on in that joint. But you want them to be able, whatever their range of motion is, be able to move fluidly through that range of motion. So I hope that makes sense. So, when we talk about functional flexibility and mobility training, it kind of intersperses with the corrective exercise. So you could use myofascial release, PNF stretching, movement through the spiral diagonal lines of movement. So again, I mentioned the Fit Towards Myofascial Release course. It does include a lot of information about how to use the spiral diagonal lines of movement, and also PNF stretching to improve mobility. And also the Fit Toward Reformer course also is a good way. Again, if you have a reformer or you're interested in doing reformer with your clients, reformer is a really good way to improve their functional flexibility and their mobility. And then if you do decide to go through Fit Towards Active Aging course, it has postural assessments that you perform with your clients, and it gives you, the assessments really give you really good insight into what muscles that you need to address, what muscles need to be strengthened, and what muscles need to be lengthened. And it helps you to correct any dysfunctional movement and disruptions that are occurring in the kinetic chain due to poor posture. So it gives you insight into also how to improve posture with your exercises. So that's all going, as I said, it all entwines together, and all of your training is going to integrate together to help to improve your clients' mobility and their function as well. So now the last component that we're going to talk about is functional aerobic training. So what does that mean, functional aerobic training? Well, it just means that you need to look at your cardio training from a functional standpoint. So you want to have your clients perform cardio that is going to help them to be able to perform their activities of daily living efficiently. So, for instance, earlier this week, my husband and I, our house has 36 stairs from the carport up to the top floor. We have 36 stairs. And we're active agers. We're over the age. Well, I'm almost 60, and then my husband is a little bit older than that. He's over the age of 70. So we needed to bring a Pilates reformer upstairs to my office, and it weighs about 85 pounds. And so we carried the reformer up the stairs, 36 stairs, up to our top floor. So to me, that is an example of having good cardio, fitness, good muscular endurance. We had the functional aerobic ability to carry that reformer up the stairs, because by the time we got to the top of the stairs, I'll tell you, we were both anaerobic for sure. That's just, I just gave that personal story of an example of how functional aerobic training and training to be able to perform your activities of daily living can come in handy. So you might have a client who has a spouse or a parent who is in a wheelchair, and they need to be able to push their spouse or their parent in the wheelchair. You might also have a client or clients who are a retired couple who take care of their grandchildren while their kids are at work. So that requires a lot of cardio, the ability to accelerate quickly and keep up with a 2-year-old. So that's something that you might want to think about. Also, you may have a client who works on air conditioners, or you might have a client who is a delivery man who has to move heavy boxes out of a truck and maybe take them in a house that has 36 stairs and needs to go to the top floor. I'm just kidding. But anyway, you can just think about the different things that your clients do throughout the day, and think about the aerobic capacity that they need to have to be able to perform those activities. So then let's just look at the basic components of a workout. So this is super basic workout, just an outline for a workout, but it can get you started if you really don't know where to start. So you're going to warm up for 5 to 10 minutes. And like I said, you could include myofascial release in the warm up. And then you would perform core and balance work for 10 to 20 minutes, and then resistance training for 10 to 20 minutes. And then your cool down is going to be 5 to 35 minutes. So you think, wow, cool down for 35 minutes. But you could include your cardio activities during the cool down after you did the core and balance and resistance training. Or you could also include self myofascial release and PNF stretching. But during the cool down at the end of the workout, you always want to include flexibility work. So that just gives you, this webinar just kind of gives you a brief snapshot into functional training for your older adults and the components that you want to include in your functional training program to help to improve that function that is lost with the natural aging process. So as we age, we just tend to naturally lose function. So that brings us to the end of my presentation. Thanks so much. And I'm going to turn it back over to Josh.
Thank you, Dolly. Yes, definitely would like to thank you for that presentation. We do have a couple questions here I'd like to definitely ask, and to start with those. And if anybody else has any further questions, please feel free to put those in the Q&A, or the chat is simple as well.
Hey, Josh, I popped in. This is Melissa.
Yes, hi, Melissa.
Hi, I just wanted to, first of all, say thank you, Dolly, so much for presenting for Fit Tour today and creating this fantastic certification. Josh and I both have put the PFP link to the discount for this certification in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and do that one more time just so you can grab it here. And then there were a couple of things that came up throughout that I wanted to make sure Dolly had an opportunity to speak to. And one of those is joint issues. So Adrian Edge asked, regarding functional training, how would you navigate those types of functions like lowering, rising with weights with older clients who have joint issues?
Okay, I'm sorry. Just repeat that for me again, Melissa. I apologize.
Regarding functional training, how would you navigate those types of functions like lowering and rising with weights with older clients who have joint issues?
Okay, so number one, I would if it wasn't prudent to have my client lower with, it depends on if you're in a group or if you're doing one-on-one training. If it's a client with one-on-one, of course, I wouldn't require that they take their weights up and down. I might hand them their weights and then take their weights away from them. If it is in a group fitness class, it might be as simple as having a step set up so that they can put their weights on the step, or having chairs that they can put their weights in the chair so that when they kneel, they can grab the weights out of the chair and then put the weights back in the chair before they stand. It just would depend on, that's a really good question too. I would just have to, it would just depend on the individual. And it might just be that I would not have them do weights on the ground if it wasn't safe for them to get up and down. I might have them, I have boxes, Pilates boxes that I set up in my studio for clients to kneel on that don't need to go all the way to the floor. So it could be as simple as, if you don't have reformer boxes, you could set up step platforms with mats on them where they wouldn't have to go all the way to the floor, where they could do a kneeling on the step platform so they didn't
Okay.
have to go all the way to the floor.
Thank
I
you.
don't
There
know
were a
if that
couple.
answers the question or not. But
I think it does. There are a couple of just like terminology questions that came up. And one of those is, what is PNF?
okay, proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. How about that?
That's a mouthful. So I know, I remember
So what it
it
is
one more time.
so it has to do with the stretch reflex that occurs when we stretch. So a hamstring stretch is a really good example to help you know what that is. So say for instance, you're doing a hamstring stretch and you have a stretch strap and you stretch, and so what happens is the stretch reflex says, oh wait, I don't want to stretch that hamstring, because your body's like defense system, red lights go off and there's like, oh, stretching too much, stretching too much, stretching too much. So what you do is you hold the stretch for about 10 seconds and then release it, and then stretch again and hold for about 10 seconds and then release it and stretch again and hold for 10 seconds. And every time you do that stretch after you release and then hold again, your neuromuscular system says, oh, okay, I understand that you want me to stretch the hamstring and it's okay, it's not going to injure me. And so every time you release and then go back to it, the muscle spindles let go a little bit more and you're able to get a better stretch. So that's a real simple way to explain it, but
Okay.
that's what it is.
Proprioceptive neuromuscular
Facilitation.
facilitation.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
and then
it's facilitated stretching.
right, and the proprioceptors, right, are the things in our body that allow us to understand where we are in space, and it
Yes.
triggers information to our brain.
Yes. So the way I explain it, like in workshops, because it is in the myofascial release course, we do PNF stretching. So I don't know if any of y'all are old enough to remember MapQuest, where we didn't have like our phone that told us like where to go and has a little voice that tells you where to go. We used to have to go and print off a map. you would put in like where you wanted to go, and then you would print off a map, and it would give you the map, and then it would give you step-by-step directions printed out. And so when you went somewhere for the first time, you would look at the directions like 3 or 4 times. And then the second time you went, you might look at the directions like 2 times. And then say like 90 days later, you go to the same place, but you've been there twice. So then you have the directions on the seat next to you, but you don't even have to look at them because you've been there twice. So that's kind of like PNF stretching. You do it 3 times, and by the 3rd time, your central nervous system understands where you want to go.
Right. So it's like you're training yourself to understand it, and your body works with you.
Yes.
Okay. Another one, adenopenia.
Okay. So, yes, sarcopenia, that is the loss of muscle with age. And then dynapenia, dynapenia, dynapenia. And that is the loss of strength.
Okay. And then we have a question about a reformer. Do you recommend what Pilates reformer would you recommend?
Okay, so just so happens that I actually am affiliated with the company, and I don't know if you can see my Pilates reformer behind me. But it is the Core Collab. And at my studio, I have retractable reformers that are from Balanced Body, and I really like my Balanced Body reformers. My studio space is small, and I rent from a dance studio that I use the studio when they're not doing dance classes. So my reformers have to be able to actually fold away, not just stack up. And so I have the Balanced Body IQ reformers, which I really like. But the Core Collab reformer, I like it better because it's engineered better, and it's more like a studio reformer than the reformers I have in my studio. And the Balanced Body reformers that I have at my studio, I really love them. And I would never change them out, but I was introduced to the Core Collab reformer earlier this summer, and I liked it so much that I affiliated with them. And I do sell the reformers for Core Collab. They're from Australia, and they just recently came to the US. So if you're interested in that, I can give you a discount. So get in touch with me. I'm at Stokes Method on Instagram, and at Dolly B Stokes on Facebook. So, but I really highly recommend the Core Collab.
Okay. I think that's about it. We had one last question that came in, and I believe it referred to our conversation about the PNF. And the question was, is that called the Golgi reflex?
Yes, it is the Golgi reflex.
The Golgi reflex. That's about it, Josh.
All right, Melissa. Actually, we just had another question come in the chat real quick, and this is probably more for you. How much more advanced is the advanced certification? They see that there's 2 of them in the on the website.
I probably
yeah, Dolly. Yeah, Dolly can speak to that.
So the primary certification, it goes over the physiology of aging, so that because you do really need to understand the physiology of aging. It also includes a wellness workbook and assessment, and it includes all of the assessments, the postural assessments, and the functional assessments. And then the advanced course gets more into programming and specifics on how to provide programming and programming, developing your own programs, and also gives you example programs if you're not interested in developing your own programming. So, both courses kind of go hand in hand. The advanced course also covers nutrition and body composition for older adults as well.
Great. All right. Thanks, Dolly. Yes, I think that wraps it up. Again, Dolly, I'd like to thank you for this great educational and informative presentation. Thank you, Fit Tour, Melissa, and the team for making this webinar happen, and for your years of support. Again, this webinar is being recorded and the on-demand link will be emailed out to all the registrants within the next 24 hours. Thank you everyone for joining the webinar today and have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you both.